Good evening, everybody. Incriminating evidence, new evidence tying former President Clinton to the Uranium One scandal. The former president, Hillary Clinton, the Obama administration are now clearly in focus in what appears to be a quid pro quo deal that gave Russia ownership of a fifth of U.S. uranium. Now, those carping about Russian collusion with the current administration, they are silent, as the real collusion involving the Clintons has been staring everyone straight in the face for years. President Trump today took up the issue, addressed the current Russia probe in an exclusive interview with our Maria Bartiromo.
There is no collusion, I can tell you that. Everybody's seen that. You know, you have Senate meetings, you have Senate hearings, and nobody has asked us to do interviews anywhere. They have found no collusion, but there's zero collusion, and everybody knows it, and everybody admits it. I will say this, the uranium situation with Russia getting uranium, they better look into that. Senator Grassley wants to look into it, and others do, but that's, to me, a very, very serious charge.
Emails now reveal that a Bill Clinton aide sought the State Department's approval for Bill Clinton to meet with a key board director of the Russian nuclear energy firm Rosatom in May of 2010. The former president wanted to take the meeting during a trip in June to Moscow. During the trip, Clinton was paid $500,000 for a speech organized by Renaissance Capital, a Russian investment bank that was talking up Uranium One shares. June is the same month that Rosatom struck its deal for a majority stake in Uranium One. Several investors in that Rosatom deal funneled $145 million to the Clinton Foundation before, during, and after the Obama administration government had approved the deal. While Bill Clinton apparently never met with the Rosatom board member, he did manage to meet in that same trip with Vladimir Putin himself at the Russian leader's private home, all part of the push at that moment for the so-called Russia reset by the Obama administration. That during a 2000 trip to Moscow, Secretary of State Clinton explaining the reset's purpose, saying, quote, "Our goal is to help strengthen Russia." And strengthen Russia they did. The Clintons certainly delivered on that promise. And now the Obama administration's Justice Department under Loretta Lynch drawing more scrutiny. In 2016, it was Lynch's Department of Justice that blocked an FBI informant from testifying about the Russian nuclear industry's efforts to win over Bill and Hillary Clinton and to influence Obama administration policies. According to the informant's attorney, the Department of Justice threatened him with a criminal case and, quote, the loss of freedom if he came forward under violation of that non-disclosure agreement. Loretta Lynch on Capitol Hill today. She met behind closed doors with House Intelligence Committee investigators, and she has plenty of troubling questions to answer. No adequate explanation of her June 2016 meeting with the former president during the FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server usage. It was just days after that tarmac meeting that then FBI Director James Comey called Hillary Clinton's actions extremely careless, but did not seek criminal charges. Comey claims Lynch instructed him to call the Clinton email scandal and investigation simply a, quote, matter instead of investigation. Joining us tonight, the first person to focus on and raise questions about the Uranium One deal and to detail the large sums of money that Bill and Hillary Clinton received either directly or through their foundation from Russian officials while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. With us tonight, Peter Schweizer. He's president of the Government Accountability Institute, also executive producer of the Clinton Cash movie, which is based on his best-selling book. And it is great to see you, Peter. And you have to feel, I would think, somewhat a sense of a gratifying sense in watching this begin to become an investigation, as we hear from the Senate Judiciary Committee, what they're focusing on.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to be back on with you, Lou. Yeah, it's been a very interesting emotional ride. You know, the book came out in 2015. The New York Times confirmed the uranium story in a front page story. Right. We expected that to sort of set off all sorts of government investigations. It did set off an FBI investigation, but basically the story has been dormant for 2 years as far as any kind of official action. Right. And now you have this great reporting that's been done, that this informant was aware of all kinds of activities. It's been a very interesting emotional ride, but just grateful and thankful that this issue now seems like it's finally going to get the airing that it deserves on Capitol Hill.
I will tell you, and our viewers, I thought that the FBI would step in immediately based on what was put forward. And then suddenly the focus was purely the email scandal, which to me, proportionately and in weight in the national security interest, looked to be the ancillary story. Your story about the Clinton Foundation, an obvious pay-for-play scandal. Quid pro quos that could be established, which you did establish, and put into your book, your movie, the reporting of the New York Times that with which you worked. I mean, and the FBI just went absolutely radio silent.
Well, you're right, Lou. You know, I can say that the field offices were very engaged. I mean, I had multiple meetings. I really can't go into detail, but I had multiple meetings over the course of 18 months. I know that they were investigating corruption at the Clinton Foundation, pay to play, but it became pretty clear, and some of this has been reported by the Wall Street Journal, that they were stopped by Department of Justice prosecutors, that they wanted subpoenas, they wanted further investigatory powers. Those were not granted by the Obama Justice Department. And then, of course, hope turned that when Trump came in, Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, that might change. But, you know, Lou, we have kind of the same cast of characters in a lot of positions, senior positions at the Department of Justice, and that has not changed. So what I would say is my experience is the field offices in the FBI very aggressively wanted to pursue this, but they've run into resistance in Washington, D.C.
And, you know, you and I have talked about this scandal, the Clinton scandal, and the refusal of the FBI, specifically the fired former director of the FBI, James Comey, and his absolute obstinance, even faced with overwhelming evidence and the field office agents who were urging investigation and prosecution. As we looked at it, there was almost no way, it seemed at various points, that the FBI would not investigate. But now we learned that an informant was also blocked, and with criminal penalties, not civil penalties, which is the normal and the only penalty usually attached to a non-disclosure agreement. They used that to absolutely stifle him, to suffocate this story. And I'm talking about with the Clinton Foundation and Rosatom and Uranium One for 4 years. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Lou, that people have to understand. This process, this CFIUS process, where the federal government approves these types of deals that have national security implications and involve foreign entities or foreign governments, it's precisely set up so that federal authorities can determine, is this foreign government or this foreign company, are they involved in criminal activity? Are they involved in espionage? Do they have nefarious motives? This whistleblower, this FBI investigation was going on at exactly this time in 2010 when they were investigating it, and yet apparently the evidence is nobody on CFIUS ever even heard about this investigation. They finally prosecuted the individual in 2014. So the entire process broke down, and there's only two possible explanations, Lou. Rank incompetence at the highest levels of the FBI or the Department of Justice, which sits on CFIUS, or something more nefarious was going on. I don't know which one, but either one of them is really bad, and we need to get to the bottom of it.
And to think that nothing has been done to this point. We're going to be talking with Victoria Tensing Monday, the attorney for this unnamed, undisclosed informant, and learn more. But that CFIUS, the Committee for Investment in the United States, is comprised of, amongst others, the Homeland Security Council, the National Security Council, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Treasury, the Secretary of Homeland Security. There is no no imaginable way in which one of those entities or individuals would not be aware of that investigation, unless something very crooked and very much a cover-up was occurring. And do you have confidence that we're going to see that reverse now?
Well, I don't know. I certainly hope so. And look, to put this in a context that people fully understand, here's the implications of this. The Russians got 20% of U.S. uranium. Rosatom now controls it. Part of the agreement in allowing them to take over the uranium, Lou, was that they would not export the uranium, because we don't want this to end up in bad hands in North Korea, with terrorists, with Iran. The New York Times confirmed in its reporting on this that they have violated that agreement. Yellow cake, under the control of Uranium One, has been exported out of the United States, and it's unclear where it's actually gone. So this is not about a far-off scandal. This is not just about the Clintons. This has enormous national security implications for the United States, and we do need to get to the bottom of it. The only way I think it's going to happen is with Senator Grassley's committee and Capitol Hill cracking heads and saying, we demand answers, and if you don't give us answers, heads have to roll.
It is also, and I want to get your reaction to this, Peter, there is no clear statement as to why we would give up, for any reason, any price, 20% of our uranium in this country. And that is a question that is left open, still unanswered. And secondly, have you ever heard of anyone putting $145 million at one moment into the hands of the Clinton Foundation? And the answer is, of course not. And these questions, most basic and fundamental, were answered by the very committee made up of the very agencies, departments, and individuals responsible for national security. This is the biggest Obama scandal. I think it may well turn out to be the biggest scandal in American political history. And we thank you for continuing to watch this, to investigate it, and hope you'll be back soon to help guide us through it. Peter
Absolutely.
Schweitzer,
Thanks for having me, Lou.
thank you for being here. We appreciate it. We're coming right back. A lot more to cover, as you might suspect. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The Islamic State prospered under President Obama. Under President Trump, the radical Islamist terrorists are suffering defeat after defeat.
Where we have made more progress against ISIS, literally, Maria, we have made more progress against ISIS in the last 9 months than in the last 8 years, as you know.
We'll discuss the Trump foreign policy successes with Fred Fleitz here next. It's about Secretary of State Tillerson. First, he reversed President Trump, saying the United States is staying in the Iran nuclear deal. Now, Tillerson says the Trump administration won't block European trade with Iran. And he'd like to see the president's views balanced by his own. We take up this unusual Secretary of State and more. Here next. Stay with us. Joining us tonight, Fred Fleitz, former CIA analyst, Chief of Staff to Ambassador John Bolton at the United Nations, now a senior vice president at the Center for Security Policy. And Fred, great to have you with us. And I think it's terrific that tonight, on this 20th of October, 9 months ago, the president inaugurated. And today, Raqqa is in the hands of U.S.-backed forces in Syria. ISIS is being rolled back. The successes, as the president promised, have been incredible, particularly compared to the passivity of the previous administration and its campaign against ISIS, such as it was.
I think that's right. I mean, President Trump took the gloves off. There were so many restrictions on our operations in Iraq and Syria, and it made a real difference against ISIS. Now, we're not going to hear this on other networks. I think we're seeing some cautious signs of progress on North Korea. But I don't know that sanctions against North Korea will ever work. But if they're going to work, they're going to work under this president because he's twisting the arms of the Chinese and the Russians and others to get them to enforce sanctions. We may have to attack, but we have to go down the sanctions road, and I'm encouraged.
And in the case of North Korea, the Secretary of State today suggesting it might be months before, only months before North Korea has the ability to deliver a nuclear warhead on a ballistic missile. This is has been a stunning ratcheting up of the estimated timetable for the nuclear threat posed by North Korea.
They could have the capability now. We don't know. The intelligence community says North Korea has 60 nuclear weapons. Whether they detonated a hydrogen bomb last month or not, we don't know. It was a 250 kiloton weapon, which was 25 times their previous weapon. This is a very serious threat, and I think North Korea's nuclear arsenal is an offensive arsenal, not a deterrent, and they will one day use it.
And as we are watching this, we hear from the Secretary of State again, almost impossible to contemplate language. Tillerson saying that he wants to balance his views with those of the president. Are you kidding me?
You know, I'm very angry with Secretary Tillerson, who told the Europeans today that they don't have to worry about their trade deals with Iran, that we're not going to go after them. I immediately tweeted that Tillerson should be fired tomorrow for this. He undermined, well, he's trying to undermine what the president did, but I think the Europeans know that Mr. Trump is serious about the Iran deal, and if it isn't fixed, and it isn't going to be fixed, but if it isn't fixed, he's going to get out.
This is a very difficult moment for many people to understand. The president is tolerating such abuse from his own cabinet that I don't react well to it, I will tell you. I just cannot imagine a person not deferring to the President of the United States, any American citizen, and to have this kind of arrogant insubordination on the part of a Secretary of State it's infuriating. And I have to give the president all the credit in the world. This is a man I don't think most of us would have ever expected to be this tolerant, to be this generous, and nor would have I expected Rex Tillerson to be such a small and silly person.
You know, I think we should think of this in light of the really inappropriate speech George W. Bush gave yesterday. The Bush circle is not in Trump's circle, and the Bush circle helped staff Trump's national security team.
Yes.
And that's why there's been all this trouble on the Iran deal, the Paris Climate Accord, radical Islam. At the end of the year, the president has to take account of who gave him good advice on personnel, and make some major changes.
Yeah, this is truly it looks to be the contest of purpose, direction, and will between Bush globalists and Trump nationalists. And thank the Lord, the president seems to be winning nearly all of the battles. Fred, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it. Fred Flights.
Good to be here.
Be sure to vote in tonight's poll. Are you as tired of Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State as we on this broadcast are? We are very tired. Really, really, really tired. Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. And follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs, like me on Facebook, and follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. On Wall Street today, another record-breaking session for stocks. As the president once said while campaigning, are you tired of winning yet? The Dow gaining 166 points, a rally again to a new record high. The S&P up 13 points, the Nasdaq up 24. All of those indexes at new record highs. Volume on the big board picking up to 3.4 billion shares on a beautiful Friday in America. And for the week, the Dow gained 2%, the S&P and Nasdaq gains of just under 1% on the week. And a reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network. Up next here, it turns out Obama and the Clintons were the real colluders with Russia. We have talked about how we'll take up their shocking corruption. Ed Rollins joins us here next. You don't want to miss it. Stay with us. Joining us tonight, Ed Rollins. He's chairman of the Great America PAC. He served in 3 presidential administrations, the chief political advisor to the House Republican leadership. Great to have you here,
Thank you.
Ed. Let's start with first, we've got the prospect of a budget, the Senate actually delivering to the president on his agenda.
Very positive in the sense that they now can start the tax bill, and they have the permission to move it forward, which is very important. Now we just have to get a tax bill,
Right.
and the president has to go sell it. I think that's a very positive thing, and obviously the House needs to basically buy it quickly into the Senate bill, and let's get don't drag this thing out any further than it is.
Yeah, we get the feeling that the House is going to move expeditiously. We heard Congressman Meadows, the chair of the Freedom Caucus, say even the conservatives are not going to have a dispute here. They're going to move ahead to get tax reform, substantive, historic, as the president says, the largest tax cuts in American history.
Well, we need to get it done, and we need to get it done quickly, and I think it's a nice way to finish this first year. We're 9 months into it.
It'd be a beautiful way, wouldn't it?
Beautiful way. It actually stimulates the economy even more so. Great.
And as we think about the prospects of a budget, let's just linger here in fantasy land for a moment and contemplate what it would mean for the first time in 2 decades for the U.S. Congress and the Senate to deliver a budget for the president's signature. Am I dreaming here?
Not totally, but I think it's a very positive first step. They could obviously make changes long term, but the critical thing here is it does give us the path to taxes.
And the Clinton corruption, the prospect of an investigation being underway, Judiciary, the Senate Judiciary Committee now beginning that, according to its chairman, Chuck Grassley.
Let's have no more closed doors. Let's make this stuff open. Stuff that is national security certainly can go closed doors. The country needs to know why anybody would sell 20% of our uranium supply to the Russians. The Russians, who have been our enemies for a long, long time, and this whole restart drill didn't work very well for their neighbors in their part of the world, and I don't know why we were so anxious to do this. The idea that we sell them 20%, we wouldn't sell them 20% of our orange.
Can I help you? I'll tell you why.
Okay.
It's really simple. The Clinton Foundation got $145 million from the Russians, and no one even asked a question, why are the Russians giving the Clintons $145 million when the obvious quid pro quo was staring at CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment, staring them all in the face? This is just clear.
It's clear, and they obviously aren't going to. They've never played by any rule, and so my sense is it's a very dangerous thing, and I think we need a full-scale investigation, and hopefully Senator Grassley will march forward on it very aggressively.
All right, and we will continue to cover it. Join us next Monday as we do so. Ed Rollins, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. We're coming right back. Much more straight ahead here tonight. Stay with us. The economy is booming, stocks are soaring, regulations slashed, all thanks to 9 whole months of the Trump presidency.
I've cut more regulations in 9 months than any president has cut during the entire term.
We take up what may end up being the most accomplished presidency in modern history with Pastor Robert Jeffress. And take a look at this lucky paddleboarder who got a once-in-a-lifetime visit while in the waters of Australia's Gold Coast. We'll show you the memorable paddle ride, the video coming up next, and much more. Stay with us. Joining us tonight is the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Dallas and author of the book, A Place Called Heaven. Robert Jeffress joins us. Pastor, great to have you with us, and congratulations on your new book. I want to start with Frederica Wilson and her contretemps with the Trump White House. And she still apparently does not comprehend what has happened to her because she focused so much on politics instead of a moment that General John Kelly says should remain sacred, and I think nearly all of America agrees with him 100%.
I do too, Lou. And look, as a pastor, I have a unique perspective on this because through the years I've had to counsel hundreds of grieving families. And from that perspective, I can tell you that what President Trump said to this widow was absolutely appropriate. First of all, he highlighted Sergeant Johnson's heroic voluntary service to our country, and then he acknowledged her very real pain. And it is the height of hypocrisy for this wacko rhinestone cowboy Congresswoman to accuse the president of insensitivity when in fact she's the one who's exploiting the widow's pain for her own partisan gain. And Lou, I am so worked up about this. I've got one more thing I want to say.
Surely.
Today, this Congresswoman had the audacity to accuse General Kelly of racism for criticizing her. Let's be clear. General Kelly was not criticizing the Congresswoman because she's black. He was criticizing her because she's a hypocrite.
Yeah, the race card has become the refuge of scoundrels, I
Yes.
think, to paraphrase an older quote. And it's a shame. It's just entirely a shame. And I think that good judgment says this is over this day. Whatever she chooses to do from here, I think, as she described herself as being now a rock star because of the national media's coverage of her, I think her status is about to change significantly. Certainly it will on this broadcast, because I can't even begin to comprehend what would be going through her mind to take a moment, as General Kelly put it, so sacrosanct, so private, so intimate. It's deeply, deeply disturbing. Let's turn.
Well, Lou,
yes, I'm sorry. I do want to leave that issue, Pastor, if I may.
Okay, sure.
It annoys me. It disturbs us all, I think.
I understand. Yes, sir.
She's had her moment of fame on this broadcast, I guarantee you. Let me turn, if I may, to a president who suddenly has, within his, it seems, his grasp, tax reform about to pass. The Senate has moved the first condition precedent to tax reform, and then, of course, the $4 trillion budget framework. I mean, this is an exciting moment, not only for the president and for the Republican Party and the leadership of the Senate and the House and all their both conferences, but for the nation, because it's been 2 decades since this country had a prospect of a budget.
Well, actually, Lou, this is what I was going to say. What we just talked about is part of a bigger narrative, and that is the Democrats are in an absolute full-blown panic because the tide is turning toward President Trump.
Right.
The economy is booming. The stock market's at an all-time high. This tax deal is going to get done. The Russia investigation has turned out to be nothing. And the president's approval rating are back where they were on Election Day. I think you're going to see more of these desperate attacks by the Democrats because they realize they are losing the battle. The narrative is changing.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, not only is this economy booming, but the foundation is soon to be in place with the passage of these tax cuts that the president has insisted upon and is, as I say, within his grasp. I mean, we're looking at the prospect of an unprecedented period of prosperity, as the president campaigned on, for all Americans. And it is, this has got to be, as you say, deeply troubling to the left, because he has now challenged the very coalition that has been the foundation of liberalism in this country, which has failed millions and millions of Afro-Americans, millions and millions of Hispanics in this country, and this president means to go after them, to bring them into the bigger tent
That's right.
of the Republican Party.
That's right. And we are happy. We're going to be welcoming President Trump here in Dallas this coming Wednesday. And as you know, Dallas is a very religious, it's a very evangelical town. And the 2 reasons evangelicals supported him by the largest margin in history was because of his promise of religious liberty and to revive the economy. He's delivering on both fronts.
Absolutely. Pastor, we thank you very much. Pastor Robert Jeffress. As always, great to see you.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you. Please roll the video now and watch as this baby humpback whale You would never know this was a baby, would you? Look at the size of that thing. It gives a paddleboarder an up-close hello and how the heck are you? The whale swimming right under the paddler, nearly capsizing him. The stunning close encounter taking place off Australia's Gold Coast. Wow, what a beautiful animal, huh? But he should stay in the water and the paddlers stay in the boat. Everything's fine in God's universe. Up next, President Trump working to deliver on his promise of a big, beautiful border wall with prototypes almost completed. We'll have the full report for you and the most recent look at those images. They are beautiful, aren't they? Just like the president said, and they're certainly big. We'll have a full report for you here next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Construction crews in San Diego putting the final finishing touches on the border wall prototypes. The workers facing a deadline next week. Imagine this, deadlines and government work. Who knew that? Well, thank goodness for President Trump introducing that idea. They're completing the prototypes before the Trump administration makes a final decision on which design will be used to secure our border with Mexico. Fox News national correspondent William LaJeunesse with our report.
Well, Lou, for the first time, we are seeing 8 different prototypes, up to 30 feet tall, side by side. The construction deadline is next week, then begins an evaluation period. They will want to know, can someone scale the wall? How long does it take? Can you dig underneath? How deep must you go? And how long would it take to cut through with a concrete saw or jackhammer? Do sensors also alert agents that someone is trying to breach the wall? Why? Because border agents will tell you a fence or a wall, call it what you want, only buys time. Every wall can be breached. You need agents and the roads necessary to get them to any point along the border within a few minutes.
We're near completion. We have 7 days left. We don't have a timeline for evaluation period.
Now, among the factors up for debate, number 1, what wall works best for the money? Number 2, location. What works in the desert, say concrete, will not work in the canyons where you have flash floods, so water needs to pass through the steel bollards on the bottom. As for the politics, despite what critics say, number 1, the Border Patrol is not proposing a 2,000-mile wall from San Diego to Brownsville. It's not realistic, not necessary, not affordable. Number 2, under the existing Secure Fence Act, lawmakers approved 700 miles of double fence. We don't have that. We have 350 miles of mostly single fence. Now, many argue Congress has already agreed to another 300 miles of barrier, although Democrats and some Republicans may dispute that. Now, currently along the border, you'll see barbed wire, 10-foot tall steel mat, and 16-foot tall steel mesh. By comparison, these are huge. Now, I'm told once selected, a few miles of concrete may replace old fencing or fill gaps where the Border Patrol is porous and illegal traffic is worst. Now, semantics matter. Call it a concrete fence or a barrier, but if you're in Washington, D.C., be careful about calling it a wall. Lou?
Absolutely, and if you look at miles and miles of what they call a border fence, it's no more than a few strands of barbed wire, much of it fallen to the desert and covered up by drifting sand. A lot better has to be done, and this is first down payment on doing exactly that, thanks to President Trump. And thank you, William LaJeunesse. Up next here, the president says there's a good reason for his fights with those rhinos in Congress.
I think actually sometimes it helps. Sometimes it gets people to do what they're supposed to be doing. And, that's the way it is. I just want what's right. And I think for the most part, they want what's right, too.
Presidential. You got to say it. President Trump being presidential and, by the way, very successful. We'll take up the obstructionist in Congress. Tammy Bruce and Dom Giordano join us here next. In our poll last night, we asked, do you believe the national left-wing nut media should join all Americans in treating our troops and their families with greater courtesy and greater respect. 99% of you said yes. You think I'm not proud of this audience? Joining me tonight, radio talk show host Dom Giordano and Washington Times columnist, Fox business contributor Tammy Bruce. Great to have you both here. Let's start. Let's start, if we may, with the president and what it is. He seems to be about to seize a tremendous and almost unthinkable success just a few weeks ago, and that is tax reform. Tammy, this is a very big deal because it could mark a shift and a long-lasting shift in American politics. Your thoughts?
Yes, and it's not just because of the nature of the issue itself. It's the fact that everyone except him and his team wanted him to fail, worked for him to fail.
And still do.
The establishment, the media, that this was the fight. It's now been 9 months, right? And maybe the baby of...
To the day, as they say.
The baby of a new America, perhaps, is emerging because the biggest, I think, accomplishment, even with all the details of what he's done with regulations and the executive orders and
cutting regulations
and reversing the damage that Obama's done, is the fact that he hasn't stopped. He faced it down and he won.
It is a big moment for the president, almost within his grasp, Don. Your thoughts?
Absolutely, Lou, and it's going to be very hard for Democrats to explain why they would get this. This is middle-class tax relief. This is the economy booming, and people like Lou Dobbs have talked about this for years. And this, Lou, I think, is a good moment for President Trump because he's lived inside this. He knows this stuff. He seems to me to be very engaged and very detail-oriented, and he sees the significance. If this rolls through, then maybe the McConnells and Ryans of the world are pushed back on other issues also.
Yes, and I think it's clear that the majority leader, Mitch McConnell, has come on board, if you will, with the president, working hard here to deliver a success in the Senate, and doing so side by side, if you will, shoulder to shoulder with the president. Those images from the White House at the invitation of the president to the majority leader, the two men standing there, was an image that prophesized the direction of this legislation and hopefully for tax reform as well as the budget. I want to turn also to the idea that two former presidents, Tammy, would come out and, without naming him, attack this president. Two presidents who, by the way, in my judgment, represent, frankly, awful leadership and awful consequences, and one a Republican and one a Democrat.
Look, it has been, for me, heartbreaking. I like President George W. Bush. He remained silent through the Obama years with the argument that we accepted that it's
well, the country was going to hell in a handbasket.
Well, exactly, but it was the principle that you do as an ex-president. And now that you've got remarkable economic turnaround, the president who oversaw an economic crash, condemning the president, this president.
The greatest economic collapse since the Great Depression.
Yeah. Talking about casual cruelty. The casual cruelty is not recognizing or being too obsessed about amnesty to recognize when your own economic collapse is going to happen. Casual cruelty is setting up a war that you leave and you do not finish and is the longest lasting war in American history. Casual cruelty is unlocking the door for Barack Obama to move forward with things like Obamacare, nationalized health care. That's casual cruelty. President Bush should say nothing from this point forward about cruelty or about this nation and how she's doing. He's not in a position to.
Don?
Lou, I could not find one caller, even though I gave full carte blanche, you go to the top of the line today, that would defend George W. Bush and this push, because my listeners know, and I hope viewers know, this is not just about President Trump. What he's saying is this is deplorables too. If you support Trump and we're pushing and continue to push, you're a nativist all of a sudden. One of the worst categorizations that you can make. And on the immigration issue, Jeb and George Bush have so tarnished themselves. We're talking about legal immigration. Dominic Joseph Giordano, I think I support things like that. This president really, really disappointed yesterday.
The idea that these two men, with all of their failings, and President Obama, who worked for 8 years against the interest of the nation, who culminated what was a disastrous presidency. History will regard him very poorly. With a $150 billion check to the Iranians, the largest state sponsors of terrorism in the world, and putting within their reach a nuclear weapon. It was madness. It is madness with which this president must contend, and both of those presidents deferring and confronting North Korea and its nuclear ambitions, leaving that also to this president, a man who is, by the way, equal to the challenge. Dom Giordano, we thank you for being with us. Tammy Bruce,
Thanks,
great to
Lou,
have
very
you
much.
with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
That's it for us tonight, and we thank you for being with us. Monday, we'll be talking with the attorney for the FBI informant who has been blocked by the Obama Justice Department and now the Trump Justice Department from testifying on the Russian bribery scandal involving the Clintons, the Clinton Foundation, and 20% of America's uranium. Victoria Tonsing is our guest Monday night. Please be with us. Until then, have a great weekend and good night from New York.